What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you'll never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, August 10th, 2018. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. This has been kind of a rough week. Just all kinds of stuff going on. And boy, you know, I'm glad it's the weekend, although Claire and I, unfortunately, have got things we have to do over the weekend. But whoa, just got to step back and take a breath here a little bit, I think. Anyway, let's get right on into it. And by the way, Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 of our show today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. So let's get right on into it. Now, yesterday we had some callers who were calling on in about how Senator Rand Paul hand-delivered a note from Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin, which basically said would like to work on maybe, you know, toning down the rhetoric and the hostility and, you know, closening ties, getting closer ties with Russia. And then right after that, Trump's State Department notified Russia that they were going to impose sanctions because of the Skripal poisoning. And talk about a mixed message. And it may have been that the State Department deliberately did this in order to derail any possibility of Trump and Putin trying to come together and pull back from the brink of war. And of course, Russia is very upset because there's been no evidence they had anything to do with Skripal. It's just a case of, we accuse you, here are the sanctions. And it's also sending a very bad message to Russia where they don't know who's really in charge over here. Because they're getting one message from the White House and another from the Department of Justice. And right now, I'm sure that Putin is asking, is Trump really in control of what's going on? Or has he become just a figurehead? Because if he was the president, he'd be over there at the State Department saying, you know, why did you do this? And, you know, don't do it again. So the deep state is still trying to push us toward a confrontation with Russia, and that is not a very, very good thing. And a lot of this are coming from the neocons, like Senators John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Bob Menendez, that are all out there demanding crushing sanctions on Russia. We will crush them. Sort of reminds me of Khrushchev pounding his shoe at the table, on the table at the UN, saying, we will bury you, we will bury you. This kind of rhetoric really does not help the situation. And you would think these people would have learned a lesson from that ill-conceived oil price war from a few years back that actually caused a lot more damage to the West than it did to Russia. These sanctions are causing a lot of harm to the West. Russia is becoming more self-sufficient, which is not what the globalists want. But the Graham-McCain-Cardin, this push for an escalation of economic war versus Russia, it's so crazy. Even the U.S. Treasury is saying this is a bad idea, and we shouldn't be doing this. And again, this is all sending a message to, well, every country on earth. Who's really calling the shots in the United States of America? Is it the Treasury? Is it the Department of Justice? Is it the FBI? Is it Donald Trump? Is it Congress? Is it CIA? The United States government right now is looking like a rudderless ship. Nobody knows where it's going next year. Now, there's an article that came out of therealnews.com saying it is entirely possible that these escalating sanctions on Russia and Iran, along with raising tensions, they could backfire. And they're saying basically the same thing that I have been saying. The world no longer sees the United States as an essential nation, as indispensable. And they're already making moves to basically re-engineer the global economy around this big empty hole where the U.S. used to be, and the U.S. dollar used to be. That's where this is all heading. The U.S. is isolating itself economically and politically from the rest of the world with this out-of-control sanctions and tariffs nonsense. The U.S. is trying to weaponize the global economy against the rest of the world, and they're failing rather badly at it. Now, China helped Russia thwart a U.S. bid to freeze a bank's assets over a North Korean sanctions dodge. And basically it says China and Russia are moving closer together. They're cooperating. And basically, again, Putin is showing himself a statesman. He's trying to ease the tensions on the Korean Peninsula. So it's getting there. And of course, basically Russia and China blocked a bid at the UN to add a Russian bank to the United Nations sanctions bloc. So of course Mike Pompeo came right out and accused Russia of North Korea sanctions violations. By golly, you do things the way we tell you to do, or we're going to give you what for here. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, getting on back to the Sergei Skripal situation, Russia is saying that the West, meaning mostly Great Britain and the United States, are acting as judge, jury, and executioner in the Skripal case. And they're reminding everybody there is absolutely no evidence tying what happened to the Skripals with Russia. And it didn't really make sense when it happened anyway. Skripal's retired. He's no longer a player. Putin had better things to do. So we have a government right now, we have a political system right now that is acting on the basis of unverified, unprovable accusations, whether it's the Steele dossier or the Skripal poisoning or Iran's nuclear weapons or whatever, or Assad's sarin gas. We accuse you, and the accusation is enough. You know, guilt by acclaim, guilt by proclamation. Now, over in Syria, the U.S. Army is basically reactivating one of their military bases in the village of Al-Sayada in western Manbij. And basically, this is supposed to be in response to an attempted assassination and a bomb attack. But again, the U.S. isn't supposed to be there in the first place. They just don't want to have to admit that they've lost, which they have here. And this article coming out of Russia Insider basically says that one of the main reasons the U.S. is still in Syria is they're still trying to find some way that they can use events in Syria to justify more hostilities against Iran. You know, those gosh darned Iranians, look what they're doing in Syria. Well, Syria asked them to come on in. Same thing with Russia, and now apparently China. The only uninvited party in that country is the United States of America here. More wars right now will be a disaster. Let's just put that on the table right now. We've had going on 18 years of war all over the globe. If Bernie Sanders is to be believed, we're militarily engaged in 76 countries around the world. Our stockpiles are drawn down. Our existing weapons are worn out. The stuff that is coming on out from the military-industrial complex is overpriced, basically junk. Remember we were talking about the Littoral class and Independence class, the Freedom and Independence class littoral combat ships and all the problems that they were having with their systems. Those programs are now going to be scrapped. These ships will never see combat. They're just going to be scrapped. And the Pentagon is going to start all over again with another weapons development program. Ooh, goody, money, 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 money. So, anyway. Now, over on Yemen, as you know, the Saudi coalition forces bombed a school bus and killed a bunch of children. Needless to say, the optics on that are not very good, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned this airstrike, calling for an independent investigation into the case. The UN won't be able to do anything because if it goes to the Security Council, Nikki Haley will veto it. We have to protect our friends even when they do horrific things like bomb school buses or shoot unarmed protesters at the fence with Gaza. These are our friends. We've got to stand by them. Speaking of Gaza, in the most recent round of bombing, Israel bombed the Gaza Cultural Center. And this kind of thing is deliberate. This is not the first time. Israel is trying to erase all signs of the Palestinian presence in that part of the world. They want it to just go away. I remember this story about this traveling exhibition of Palestinian embroidery. The Palestinians do beautiful embroidery. And somebody had organized a world tour to various museums of these examples of the clothing that was made and embroidered in Palestine. And it was very well received, and people were saying, wow, you know, this is a good example of the Palestinian culture. Then this traveling exhibit got to Los Angeles airport and promptly disappeared from inside a securely locked cargo warehouse. And that was the last anybody ever saw of it. Now, according to Israel's culture and sport minister Miri Regev, she said that Israel should just start assassinating the Hamas leaders. You know, it's time for the leadership of Hamas to live in fear. I'm sure they already do. Looking on the cable box last night, I was seeing just a flood of war movies, stuff about Hitler, the Holocaust. Every time the cable channels start flooding that stuff out there to rebuild Israel's victim status, it means something really nasty is about to happen. Now, interestingly enough, over in the Israeli town of Rosh Hain, there's a candidate running for mayor right now. And his name is Raz Sagi. And back in 1989, he killed a Palestinian teen. And the court found that the boy had posed no danger to the soldiers. And Sagi basically just shot the kid in the back. And he got 3 months community service within the military. He was not demoted. And now he's running for mayor. You know, look at what's happening down in South Africa right now, where it's just becoming normalized for the black population to go after and just kill whites with impunity. When you see that kind of injustice spreading across the globe, you know the world is in serious, serious trouble. Now, getting back to Israel, over in Nablus, Palestinians living there are at risk of forcible transfer, according to a United Nations agency update, because Israel has declared where they're living a firing zone. This is a very common tactic Israel will use. They'll go into an area where Palestinians are living, and they'll declare it some kind of a military zone, and under Israeli law, the Palestinians get shipped on out. Now, interestingly enough, under international law regarding the treatment of occupied territories, when Israel stops using that land for military purposes, it's supposed to be given back to the people who were living on it. Israel doesn't do that. They'll put a settlement on there. Now, remember what I said about the Bloody Monday massacre and all the massacres since then being Israel's Amritzar. Because the rest of the world's Jewish people are starting to turn against Israel. They've simply gone too far. Nobody wants to be seen to be associated with a government that behaves that badly. And that's what we're talking about here, the government and its behavior. It's not anti-Semitism. It's not hate of the Jewish people. We're talking about the behavior of a government. That's fully protected by the First Amendment. So over in Britain, one of the largest donors to Israeli charities, Dame Vivian Duffield, has described the new Jewish nation-state legislation to South African apartheid. This actually appeared in an interview with Haaretz, which remains relatively balanced. And over the decades, Dame Vivian's foundations have donated several £100 million to Israeli charities and infrastructure projects, as well as Jewish and non-Jewish British institutions. But she went on to say, every step Mr. Netanyahu takes is a catastrophe, and it is very difficult to defend Israel right now to represent it to England. So the tide is definitely turning. What Israel has been doing is indefensible. It is indefensible. It's war crimes is really what it is here. Well, yesterday we were talking about relations with North Korea and how Kim Jong-un he'd sent home the remains of the soldiers who died at the start of the Korean War. He's dismantling this missile launch site. Dismantled a rocket engine test site, and was now saying it's, time for the U.S. to do something to show their good faith. Well, what does the United States do? They throw more sanctions on North Korea. This is like throwing gasoline on a brush fire. And knowing the Asian mindset, this is going to simply infuriate them. And it's sending the message. The United States is not operating on good faith. Pompeo and Bolton are still taking that attitude of North Korea has to do everything that we say first. Then maybe we'll do something nice. But this is amping up the situation. And neither Bolton nor Pompeo appear to have a grasp of how the Asian mindset is going to interpret all of this. And so it should come as no surprise that North Korea is now threatening to end stability on the Korean Peninsula. And maybe that's the reaction Mike Pompeo and John Bolton wanted. Maybe they're aware of the Koreas' plan to reunify, and this is their way to make sure it doesn't happen. Because they don't want the Koreas to reunify. They don't want peace. All of these people, their stock portfolios are loaded up, probably, with stocks in the defense contractors. They're just making themselves rich. Doesn't matter how many people bleed to death for it, as long as they get their checks. Now, as you know, Russia has, and for that matter China, has been developing some really new, amazing weapons. They're thinking outside the box, whereas our military-industrial complex, for the most part, spend vast sums of money basically updating the weapons that fought in World War II. And one of the weapons that a lot of people are looking at is Russia's so-called doomsday torpedo. And it's called the Poseidon Unmanned Underwater Vehicle. And more information is coming out about it. Now, when it first came on out, they were screaming 100 megaton warhead, and I cast serious doubt on that because Russia's only ever built one 100 megaton nuclear bomb, and when they actually set it off, they dialed it back to 50 megatons. It was a technology demonstrator. It was never going to be a viable weapon. Well, now it turns out that this Poseidon carries a 2 megaton nuclear warhead, which is still pretty sizable, can take out an entire carrier battle group or really wreck a harbor. And, oh, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And once again, we are standing in front of you with our hands outstretched. And I want to start by saying to those who have donated and contributed, thank you very much. And for those of you who have yet to do so, thank you in advance. But as you can see from what's going on with Google and Facebook and all this censorship that's going on, And I got an email here from somebody just saying, what happens if they start censoring emails they think are objectionable? Because those emails are going through some of these servers. Are they going to start filtering and censoring our email? So we're in a fight. We're in a fight for freedom of speech and the First Amendment. We're in a fight for the truth. We need your help. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Road, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number to call in a debit or credit card donation or to pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. Okay. Let me just take care of something here. Okay, I'm communicating with the control room here. Okay, so we're talking about Russia's new autonomous torpedo. They're calling it a torpedo. It's really way too big. It won't fit in a conventional torpedo tube. It's actually quite large. And it's called Poseidon. And it's nuclear powered as well as being nuclear armed. And remember, this story came out the other day. The Russians have developed a nuclear reactor that can actually last the entire life of a submarine without needing to be refueled. Now, I don't know how long this doomsday torpedo is supposed to be running. I imagine not as long as a submarine. But apparently it is faster than any torpedoes that the West has. It's faster than any submarines that the West has. And there is a concern that for all the boasting that the new head of the U.S. Submarine Command made, the U.S. has no real defense against this system. And part of the problem, of course, is that much of the SOSUS net, which was developed during the Cold War, has been shut down or turned over to the whale watchers. And I'm sure they could bring it on back along with the Surtas boats. But this thing can just stay down forever. It can hug the bottom of the ocean. It can go as slow or as fast as it wants. And it's going to be kind of hard to stop this thing. All right, we're going to take a phone call now from Layla in Ontario. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I had a lot of trouble getting through. I dialed for at least 5 or 10 minutes before my phone got through, and then I just don't know if you're if there's someone influencing which calls get through to you.
No,
so I just wanted to alert
you. There was a technical issue in our control room, so you're not being filtered. Okay. You're not being
That's
blocked.
Reassuring.
Yep.
Okay, I thought it might be someone else, not you. But it's good to know that it was just another technical issue. And hopefully, as funds and donations come in, those technical issues can be eradicated as you upgrade your equipment. I cannot stress often enough to people how crucial it is that we support you in tangible means,
yes.
Not simply by listening to you, but actually sending in donations. It's a matter of survival for ourselves. You started out talking about the embroidery.
Yes.
Yes, that was one of the things that Ruth Diane, one of the industries that she tried to get going with the women in the West Bank. Obviously, she became ostracized and by the powers that be in Israel at the time, but they wouldn't dare interfere with a living icon. Then you talked about what is now going on in South Africa. One of the things that terrifies me is that if ever the Palestinians were liberated, if somehow some miracle occurred and Palestine is created, my fear is that after 70 years of bitterness and anger and abuse, I don't know how they will react. Not all of them. But there are going to be those, the anger that we see now at Gaza may just be, may be repressed for a while. I don't know. The thing that bothers me is, that saying, the sins of the father are visited on the sons.
Yeah,
the problem is the sons then.
I don't agree with that one, by the way. Anyway, listen, we have to take a break for commercial. Stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking with Leila in Ontario. We're talking about the Palestinian culture and arts, and especially the embroidery, which, back before the founding of Israel, it's one of the things Palestine was famous for around the world, was the embroidery that they did.
Yeah, when I did visit Israel, Palestine, one of the earlier times when I attended the program for foreign students at the Hebrew University, and I went to Bethlehem, my aunt made me a beautiful dress that she embroidered for me, and I wish to God I hadn't lost it. It was magnificent. And that's one of the things that was passed on into Europe. I don't think people realize that a lot of the early Europeans, a lot of them were migrants from the Middle East. And I won't go into that detail right now. That's a call for another time. Right now, I'm just so concerned. When I talk about the sins of the father, I mean, with the circumstances that are created by one generation are in place when the next generation is born. Many of the Israelis today who are avid Zionists don't really think about what they were born into and how it occurred, and they adopt all the sense of justification for what they are doing. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, the sin is passed on. And so too is the imprisonment of the victims, because they're born into today's Palestinians are actually some of the most intelligent people I have known are from the Middle East. And I don't mean to brag. I mean, they are. I don't mean about myself, but I mean, so many of the people that I've met have astounded me. And once they come to the U.S. or Europe, they often excel within the universities. But the thing that frightens me is that because of that capacity, they need to be wiped out. And Israel knows this. And I don't think people realize that they're not just watching theater. This isn't just a play on the world stage, that the curtains will come down and they're all going to be safe. What they are watching now happening to the Palestinians is what they are bequeathing to their children if it doesn't happen to them in their lifetime. Something must be done. The problem is that anyone who goes into government is going to have the blessing and the power of these evil globalists. And when I talk about evil globalists, Zionists may be a good name for them, with Jerusalem as headquarters. And I've always recognized, or long recognized, that Jerusalem was intended to be the headquarters for this Zionist movement. I just didn't realize the scope they had undertaken and how effectively they had all of the pieces in place so that when they decided to make the move, it would happen. For example, here in Canada, Justin Trudeau, his brother was well known, and so was Justin, very sympathetic with the Palestinians. But what has happened, Justin has become a bit of a joke, and he's probably, like all the others who may want to speak up against what's being done to the Palestinians, they're being silenced, threatened. Who knows what's being done to them? The powers that have fallen into the hands of this cadre of people that we call Zionists, the only ones who can stop them actually are the people in Israel, the Jews in Israel primarily, and also the Jews outside. And I've always said this to any of my friends when I was active within the cause. I said, give it up. Nothing is going to happen until Jews themselves realize that they are the primary victims and that they have been used in order to commit sins that if they actually thought about it would bring them horror and shame. So I am appealing again, not only to the people in various countries. When you see Muslims that you think are acting like freaks, that's not their normal way. For example, I remember seeing on the Alex Jones show, he was showing how disgusting the Muslims are. There was a man washing his butt in the public square from a tap. I looked at the video, and the guy was using his right hand. In Islam, it is forbidden.
Yeah, I know.
To wipe your butt with your right hand. It has to be only with the left. That guy was there as a plant. That video was put out as a plant. And unfortunately, Alex took the bait, not knowing enough about Islam. And this is the problem. I didn't know much about Islam until I started to study myself. But all I knew was that when we were all living together in Palestine, and when I say we, I include the most recent ancestries that I have. My mother, as a child, her father used to send her on the Sabbath to do the things that the Orthodox do for themselves. There were other things that Muslims were forbidden from doing, and my father would send his daughter, my mother as a child, to go and do the things for them that they could not do. This is how much they respected one another's religious beliefs and how much they recognized the commonality of the human beings that live there. And this is why we can call it, the Satan's cauldron, or we can call it the Holy Land. The point is that this is where the message has come out. And in actual fact, it didn't require divine revelation. It's common sense. For human beings to live together, you have to seek out what is within you that is the highest of aspirations. And oddly enough, what just comes to my mind is the end of one of the story of two cities. At the very end, when the man dies instead of his friend, I can't remember the exact story, but it was during the Tale of Two Cities. The point is, often you do have to take the risk. You may suffer the consequences. You may even die. You may even willingly. And that is the symbol that so many Christians love about the concept of Jesus Christ, whether or not it was true, whether or not it was intended. Certainly crucifixion was extremely common. Jesus was not given unusual treatment. And remember, the plaque above his head on the cross said, "This is the King of the Jews." Yes. It didn't say this is the Messiah. So it was, he sacrificed. If this event occurred, he was willing to go. As a symbol of each of us must be willing to give our lives for the well-being of others. Now, the tragedy is that humanity also has a trait that is inevitably inherent in many people: hatred, fear, and hatred often grows out of fear and misunderstanding, not to mention greed and the desire to knowingly steal from others. And so this is like the odd dichotomy that is within the human being. We're capable of aspiring to some of the most beautiful and altruistic ideals, and yet at the same time we can be so savage. And once savagery is let loose, it becomes almost like a virus that takes hold. Madness breeds madness.
That does seem to be what's been going on around the world here. Listen, I hate to cut you off here, but we've got another caller waiting on the line. I do want to back up to this issue about the sins of the father and everything. I think that the people of Israel ought to be taking a look at what happened down in in South Africa is a good example, which used to be an apartheid state. White minority, black majority, and now look at what's going on today. They're stealing the farms, they're killing off the white people, because that rage that is felt by that population built up generation after generation after generation of abuse and maltreatment. We're seeing, again, the same thing over in Zimbabwe. Or we did see it. Zimbabwe is finally starting to calm on down. And Israel needs to understand that if there comes a time when Israel's iron grip on Palestine breaks, that there are going to be repercussions. It's going to be impossible to prevent there from being repercussions.
That's what frightens me too. And,
Yep.
May I make this one other comment? There's one particular guy on independent media who actually broadcasts out of Canada, and he considers himself a philosopher king. He has often talked about both the Middle East and Africans as having IQs in the 70s and 80s. That really infuriates me, because not everybody has been tested. you cannot generalize that all Africans have a low IQ. The thing that we have to remember is that the brain is so plastic, it is developed by what is around it.
Yes.
And I've known some Africans, or even those who were from the Caribbean and were partly white, of immense intelligence and immense compassion. And when I hear someone like that talking about them as being inferior intellectually, it's an outrage. And this too is part of what breeds the hatred that is causing this kind of murderous act. And dehumanizing the enemy is going to come back on the people or the next generation. Everything has a consequence. There are always repercussions. And anyway, I should let you go. I've monopolized too much of your time. Thank you, Michael.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Layla, and thank you for the phone call and all that information. We're going to let you go and switch over to Jim in Chicago. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, would you tell me, is Donald Trump putting sanctions on Turkey to appease his evangelical supporters?
It may be, because there's apparently been reports coming out of Turkey that they're kind of rough on the Christians within the country, but mostly I think it's because Turkey has very clearly been drifting away from the United States and toward Russia and China. And also, of course, Turkey now wants to arrest a bunch of U.S. service people at the, I think it's the Incirlik Air Base, for their role in the failed coup d'etat against Erdogan. And so that may be a prime motive there. Because I don't think the United States wants to go on in and start a war against Turkey. In fact, given the fact that we did lose in Syria, sanctions are pretty much the only weapon Trump has left to play. But he's overplaying.
Right. Right. Because Turkey is one country. I really do feel that they would do something toward America or get other countries involved, such as Iran, to go after America.
Well, I think Turkey just kind of wants to go its own way. We're looking at a realignment of the Middle East, and most of it's being driven by Israel and the United States. They've smashed up Iraq. They've smashed up Libya. Now they're aiming to smash up Iran. But it's like the end of the Ottoman Empire, where they just went on in and just redrew the map of the Middle East and said, we're going to create all these little tiny countries and keep them arguing against each other so they'll remain weak and easy to control.
Right. Now, Turkey's part of the NATO, aren't they?
I have to be honest, I'm not sure. I think they changed their mind, if I recall correctly. They were going to join, but now they've said no, they're not interested.
Well, at one time, Turkey was a major ally to America.
Well, I think those days are pretty much over after that failed coup d'etat.
Right, right, and more than likely, the America CIA was behind that.
Certainly, and the fact that this cleric who's been given sanctuary in the United States, Turkey thinks this guy was the mastermind, and the U.S. will not turn him on over. Let's see, I'm looking at this. Apparently, Erdogan, I guess Turkey is a part of NATO, but I'm looking at this headline from last year where basically Erdogan withdrew all of his troops from NATO exercises. So,
okay.
Yeah. So it looks like
all right,
they
well,
may be
Michael,
pulling out.
Well, okay, you take care. Have a nice weekend.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Same to you. Now, getting on back to the news here. Talking about the domestic political situation in this country here. Robert Mueller is going to subpoena Randy Credico, the man Roger Stone claimed was his back channel into WikiLeaks, one day after Credico told MSNBC's Ari Melber that Mueller had previously requested a voluntary interview, which he declined on the advice of his attorney. So Mueller's apparently going back into WikiLeaks. Is going to try and revive that whole Russia hacked the DNC situation. which is probably why the Democrats are just in a panic over the Senate's invitation to Julian Assange for a meeting. Now, it's already known Russia did not hack the DNC computers because of the metadata on the files themselves. But they're still trying to get that one on out there. You know, oh, Russian collusion here. Now, some new emails have surfaced where apparently Christopher Steele, while he was writing this ridiculous dossier on Donald Trump, had extensive contacts with the number 4 Department of Justice official. That was Bruce Orr. And so Steele was, I don't think they were talking about sports scores. This whole thing about ginning up this phony dossier apparently involved coordination with the Department of Justice. They were just out to get him. All right, we're going to take a phone call. We're going to start with Steve Elkins. Steve, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Well, the question to the last caller, we're talking about Turkey. Question I have is, did the United States not install a missile defense system about a year ago in Turkey?
I think they may have. I mean,
they were talking about it. I thought it was in the works. I thought it was a done deal.
Well, the U.S. does have an Air Force base there.
What's that?
The U.S. does have an Air Force base there. That's where the Turkish officials want to go in and arrest some of the officers there. They're accused of taking part in that failed coup d'etat.
No, I'll have to research it more, but I thought that we actually had some contract with Turkey that allowed us to put a missile defense system in there, and we used it for the excuse we used was, of course, evil Russia.
Yeah,
we had to do this. I thought we did this. I'm not sure.
I don't remember off the top of my head. I can't remember everything that's going on in the world, unfortunately. I'm an old guy. But, you know, it's worth remembering that it was putting missiles in Turkey that led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we're...
Correct.
History may not repeat, but it definitely is rhyming a lot. We got to take a break for commercials. Stay on the line, Steve, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Steve, who called into the show here about missiles in Turkey, he sent me an article where apparently Turkey did accept a missile radar for NATO defense against Iran, not Russia. Although I'm sure it'll work against the Russians if they're over Turkish skies here as well. Alrighty, now then, get back to our domestic politics here. As we come up on the midterms and everybody's on the campaign trail, Ivanka Trump is going to be out there hitting the campaign trail to suburban districts where Trump's hardline policies are turning off supporters. They're using Ivanka Trump to basically appeal to the women's vote, and well, it's a smart thing to do because Ivanka Trump is exactly what the liberal feminists hate. She's not only beautiful, she's successful. And they don't like that. Now, okay, there's new evidence out here providing additional support that the British interfered with the 2016 U.S. election. And apparently, well, it all goes back to Christopher Steele. Steele was paid $168,000 by Glenn Simpson's company Fusion GPS for the memos containing information that were selectively briefed to journalists approved by Simpson and used by the FBI. The Steele dossier, of course, is junk, total fiction. So, yeah, there you have meddling in our elections by Great Britain. Mueller's not interested in that. He wants to get Russia. We're going to get Russia. And, of course, look at how much Israel meddles in our internal politics. And nobody talks about it. It's this big, deep, dark secret. You don't want to talk about Israel buying our politicians. That would be anti-Semitic. Anyway, we were mentioning before that Julian Assange has been invited to meet with a U.S. Senate committee regarding the DNC server and how and why WikiLeaks came to be in possession of those files. And apparently Assange is seriously considering it. The only question is going to be, how will they meet where Assange will, be personally safe from arrest or even worse? And of course, the Democrats are totally in an uproar because if Seth Rich testifies before the Senate committee, if Julian Assange testifies before the Senate committee that it was Seth Rich who walked the files out of the DNC on a flash drive, that whole Russian hacking narrative just collapses. And so they're in a panic about that right now. Interestingly enough, an apartment building across from the Ecuadorian embassy, the tenants received a letter from the BBC asking to basically install cameras on the outside of their apartments. Basically keep an eye on Assange. We're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, interestingly enough, Jeff Sessions has now started criticizing the Southern Poverty Law Center. And he basically spoke out at the Religious Liberty Summit of the Alliance Defending Network of the successful Christian public interest law firm. The SPLC is designated, or rather the SPLC designates as a hate group. And he basically came on out with this criticism in the wake of the revelation that the Southern Poverty Law Center has tight connections with the FBI. And now the hope is that the FBI, which has now been outed, will start to delink from that. Over in Hollywood, West Hollywood specifically, there's been an interesting development on the Walk of Fame. As you know, the city council, a bunch of hardcore leftists, they decided to permanently remove Trump's star because of his treatment of women, while leaving the stars for Kevin Spacey, who's under 6 different investigations for sexual assault, and Bill Cosby. They're still perfectly in place. An anonymous artist basically created these tiles that look exactly like the tiles in the Walk of Fame with Donald Trump's star on them, and they were adhesive backed, and he put about 50 of them onto the Walk of Fame. So people are pushing back at all this leftist nonsense here. All righty, getting on back to the primaries. As you know, Ohio's very much in play, and there's a lot of bizarre stuff going on. We reported yesterday about how all of a sudden there was somebody found a box of uncounted ballots. Oh my goodness, how could have we missed this box full of ballots? And of course, they helped out the Democratic candidate. But some other anomalies have surfaced in the Ohio vote. Apparently, 170 voters in the Ohio race were over 116 years old. Now that is a real trick because the world's oldest living person is 115. Some of the voters were listed as old in their registration records as 218 years old, meaning their registrations are being kept active by using them for vote fraud year after year after year after year after year. Which tells you how long this has been going on here. Okay, as you know, the left is dealing with a PR problem, which are all these liberals who, encouraged by people like Maxine Waters, are assaulting Trump supporters and conservatives in general just out in public. They're sitting in a restaurant, they're having a meal, and they come on in and they just give them a hard time. And it's looking really bad. And voters are looking at this and they're turning off from the Democrats. So ABC had a video to try and balance it out, showing Trump supporters harassing a leftist at a restaurant. And basically, it turns out, if you read on down into the article, ABC admits they hired actors. And their excuse is they wanted to illustrate that this problem is out there. Well, everybody's got a cell phone with a video camera in it. If that problem was really out there, I'm sure the lefties would be flooding social media with such videos. Over at CNN, you have to wonder, where do they get these people? Apparently, CNN's host, Alison Camerota, gave the weather report, and basically, she's a supporter of global warming. If you're a denier, that's a bad thing. So CNN reported on a massive Colorado hailstorm, and it was enormous. The chunks of ice, a lot of property damage, and 2 animals were killed at the zoo in Colorado Springs. To which Allison, with a serious look on her face, said, "Is it August in Colorado?" And her co-host turned to her and said, "Yes, it's August in Colorado." Where do they get these people here? By the way, there's more evidence surfacing that once again, all these reports of record-setting heat are being exaggerated. We know about the trick where they go out to the airport to get their temperatures. We're going to have another hard winter. It's going to hit early. It's going to hit hard. And these global warming people will not give up. Remember, George Soros is already asking Facebook to deplatform anybody who questions human-caused global warming, because part of his plan for a global government is a global environmental authority to deal with the crisis of human-caused global warming by telling you how you're going to live your life, how big a home you can have, and so forth and so on. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. The good news is the corporate media is losing. And maybe this is why they hit the panic button. There was a poll by Ipsos that went on out and surveyed the American people regarding Trump's comment that the news media is the enemy of the people. And 1/3 of Americans said that yes, that was true. Mostly Republicans. 85% of the respondents said they believe freedom of the press was essential to American democracy, and I agree. But that includes the independent press. We're essential for democracy. We provide the counterpoint. We expose the lies. When you have the official news, like Pravda and Izvestia, that's not democracy. Nobody can look at the Soviet Union with its tightly controlled media and say that that was any kind of a democracy. And by the way, freedom of speech, that First Amendment, isn't there to protect lies and liars. It's there to protect the truth and the truth tellers, so that we have the right to basically speak out and say the government is wrong to be doing this. The corporate media is misrepresenting things when they say that. That's what freedom of speech is all about. Peacefully, respectfully, civilly, but the right to voice our objection and our counter observations. All right, let's talk about the economic news. Apparently, Chinese investors are back to dumping the Hong Kong stocks. Apparently, they've sold more than $1 billion through the first 2 weeks of August. We did not have our normal Friday happy ending for the American stock market. The Dow closed 196 down. So everybody's getting hammered by all of this stuff. Okay. Article coming on out from Tsarism.com, and the title says it all. The U.S. should enjoy the dollar hegemony as it's not going to last long. And in the article it says, the world will simply not allow the United States to have domination over its economic future any longer after the Trump presidency. Well, Trump didn't start this weaponization. It's been going on a while. The article goes on to say something that we've said here on the radio show. Other countries will find a way around the dollarization of the global economy. A system set up after the end of World War II with the Bretton Woods Agreement, ironically to prevent conflict started by financial pressures between nations. Now, part of the problem with that, of course, is there were certain conditions in the Bretton Woods Agreement. The other nations that signed on to it did so on two conditions. One, that the U.S. would not overprint those paper dollars. And two, that those dollars would always be redeemable for gold at the price back then of $32 per ounce. And immediately the Federal Reserve, which is not actually part of the U.S. government, started overprinting those dollars. And they would send those paper and ink things to other countries to buy imported goods. And it was one of the ways that the U.S. enjoyed post-war prosperity, along with the fact that other nations had to come and buy our products because their own industrial base had been bombed. But that was a big part of it. So other nations were sending us wine and cheese and clothing and what all else in exchange for these boxes of ink and paper. And the Federal Reserve did overprint. They're always overprinting. They've been doing it all along. Then along comes Richard Nixon, and France looks into their bank vaults and they see these huge stacks of Federal Reserve notes. And they notify the United States they intend to exercise that part of the Bretton Woods Agreement where they're going to return the paper currency to the United States and exchange it for gold at $32 per ounce. And Nixon took a look at the U.S. gold reserves, realized there was nowhere near enough to cover all that paper currency that was floating around the globe, or even just in France, and he ended gold convertibility. So basically, the two promises the U.S. made to the rest of the world regarding Bretton Woods were both broken. And so the rest of the world is not under any obligation to continue to go through the U.S. dollar. The U.S. uses the threat of its military might to keep countries subordinate to dollar hegemony. That was the real reason for the war on Iraq. Saddam Hussein got permission from the United Nations to sell Iraq's oil for the euro. 1 year later, screaming, nuclear weapons, the U.S. invades, lynches Saddam Hussein, wrecks the country. No nukes were found, of course. And Iraq's oil is back on the world market only for the U.S. dollar. Same thing down in Libya. Muammar Gaddafi shut down their private central bank, set up a state bank and a value-based currency, the gold dinar, and then announced that Libya's oil was only for sale for the gold dinar. So the U.S. gins up a color revolution in Libya. They kill Gaddafi. Libya's oil is back on the world market only for the U.S. dollar, and nobody knows where the gold for the gold dinar went. Now, here's an article from thoughtcrimeradio.net. Everybody's always saying, well, what's the cause of the war? What's the cause of the war? And we've been saying all along, big historical events like wars and assassinations, there's never just one reason. You have multiple parties with overlapping agendas, and when their agendas all meet at a single course of action, that's when it's going to happen. But everybody may have a different reason for doing it. When you look at the JFK assassination, organized crime had one reason for wanting him dead. The Texas oil billionaires had another reason for wanting him dead. The bankers had yet another reason for wanting him dead. Israel had another reason for wanting him dead. But they all agreed. They wanted him dead, so it happened. Now, turning here to Iran, a lot of people have different reasons for wanting to go to Iran. But according to this article, one of the main players that is pushing for this is, of course, the Rothschild banking dynasty. Remember, we had that quote coming on out yesterday. Jacob Rothschild is just really upset that the order of the global economy is changing. He doesn't like that one bit. But they're after that bank of Iran. They want that central bank because Iran is one of only 3 countries left in the world whose central bank is not under Rothschild control and operating as a private central bank, creating the currency out of thin air and loaning it into circulation and plunging those nations into debt. Now, back in 2003, or actually before 9/11, there were 7 countries not under the slavery of private central banking: Afghanistan, Iraq, Sudan, Libya, Cuba, North Korea, and Iran. By 2003, Afghanistan and Iraq had been converted to the Rothschild system, and by 2011, Sudan and Libya were also gone. In fact, in Libya, they set up that Rothschild private central bank in Benghazi while the war was still going on. They couldn't wait to get the people enslaved to death. And now they want to do it to Iran. What the private central bankers want to do is just have every country in the world under private central banking and then propagandize the next generation that it's always been this way and this is the only way it can work. And I remember when I was in grade school, all the way back in farming country, being shown this little film strip, which came with this little record that had a bell on it, and you'd turn the knob on the film strip projector, just explaining the Federal Reserve and how this was really the only way that banking could be or should be handled in this country. And now, of course, we know that was a big lie. This nation started with a completely different system that worked for the people and the nation. Now, over at Ned Davis Research, they're warning that stocks could plummet 20 to 30% next year, in the biggest drop since the 2008 financial crisis. We're seeing all these warnings being sounded all over the place. And the government and Wall Street, they're just holding this all together with spit and baling wire and duct tape, lots of duct tape out there. But they're not going to be able to keep it together forever. It's just a question of when. What breaks first that starts the whole thing coming down? And a lot of people are saying it's probably going to be the bond market this time. Over at Tesla, I'm actually starting to feel sorry for Elon Musk. I used to feel slightly envious of his SpaceX, but remember we went through this thing where Tesla announced that he was going to take Tesla private, that he had the financing to do a stock buyout from the investors. Then we had the story yesterday where a former chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission said that if Elon Musk had lied, if he didn't have the financing when he made that announcement, he could face civil and criminal penalties. Today we're hearing that there is, in fact, a Securities Exchange Commission inquiry underway. I wish they'd gone that fast with Bernie Madoff, but that's just me being me. So Elon may be in trouble. Somebody's come out with an interesting theory, and this is in the Daily Mail. Apparently Ross Gerber, the boss of U.S. wealth manager Gerber Kawasaki, said that short sellers betting against Tesla are being backed by big oil. That the oil companies want to sink Tesla. In fact, they want to sink all electric cars. Well, there's already a lot of electric cars out there. I'm really not sure about this because most of these electric cars are being powered by being plugged into the power grid, which for the most part also runs on oil and gas. So this analysis seems to be a little bit slippery. But it could be. I mean, if you go back and you look at what happened with Tucker and the Tucker torpedo and how the big 3 automakers just ganged up on him. They didn't want the competition. Big business can be very, very brutal. But right now, until a new source of electricity is found to recharge all those electric cars, most of them are still burning oil and gas, just not immediately in their presence. It's down the road at the power station. Bulgaria has now turned down the South Stream pipeline. and is now hurriedly laying pipe to connect to the Turkish stream. So there's a lot of geopolitics going on with those oil pipelines. And it's interesting that Bulgaria is now sort of moving closer to Turkey as well. We're starting to see some major, but subtle, but major shifts in the alignment of the world's economy. As you know, things down in South Africa have not been going very well for the white farmers. And it's turning into chaos down there, and already their economy's in trouble. And South Africa, under their new leadership, is now seen as a liability for BRICS. And who knows, they may be kicked out. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'm going to step back in the normal order of talking points because this story is just coming on in. It is Friday, and of course, Friday is when the Gazans will have their protest marches along the border fence with Israel. And despite claims yesterday that there was a ceasefire, the Israelis opened up on the Palestinian marchers. They shot a uniformed Palestinian medic through the head. One other person was killed. 307 Palestinians have been wounded. So that's what's going on over there. All right, let's talk about immigration and refugees here. Over half of the criminal suspects in Vienna, Austria are foreigners. And the incidents of rape and murder are now up. So how's that multiculturalism thing working out for you here? It's a mess. It's a mess over there. Apparently, migrants are brawling on the streets of Naples. Italian soldiers were forced to intervene. There were 3 separate bouts of violence that took place in Naples' Vasto district. And they're saying acts of violence are just becoming more and more common in the area. Down in Australia, we reported earlier about how these 100 Africans were basically attacking this neighborhood in Melbourne. Well, it appears to be spreading. And Australians are now being told by the government to basically lock their doors, shelter in place, because these African migrants are still rampaging, screaming that the Australians are white trash. Yeah, real good idea to have open borders. It's really working out well. We talked before about British independent member of the European Parliament, Janice Atkinson, and she's saying that looking at the increase in rapes, gang rapes, violent crime, it is time to close the borders. This idea of an external Schengen is not going to work. And because of the existing population of refugees who are violent criminals, even the internal Schengen needs to be looked at. Now, Atkinson was the one who came up with that quote that I really love. When you import the third world, you get third world problems. Now, you'll probably remember about, I think it was a month ago, there was a migrant who was on a plane about to be deported, and this Swedish refugee activist got up and made a ruckus, wouldn't let the plane leave until this migrant deportation was canceled. And finally, in order to get the plane off the ground and calm everybody down, they let this migrant back out into the streets of Sweden. Well, it turns out he's not a very nice guy. He's a child abuser. Apparently, he beats his wife. And it certainly makes this refugee activist look a little bit silly here. Okay, now, apparently, Trump's wall is starting to be built. And over in California, along the border, there, basically in Calexico, there was a border jumper who tried to climb over this 30-foot high border wall, and he fell off and broke both of his legs. Now that's going to be a deterrent. And apparently the Border Patrol caught the incident on video. Well, that's something that needs to be played all over the place down in Mexico. Now, a lot of people are talking about human trafficking, how much human trafficking is involved with all these border crossings, our children being trafficked for sexual purposes. And like any other crime, when you're not dealing with it, it grows. And now it is estimated, according to the head of one of France's most prominent asylum seeker support organizations, the global network of human traffickers who are aiding migrants across borders into Europe and elsewhere, it's a $32 billion industry. Now, this individual's idea is they need to stop the human trafficking because they're taking advantage of the migrants. Whereas I think you just need to stop the migrant situation because it is out of control. And as I've said all along, migration is a filter. We're not getting the best of the people from those source countries. We're getting the people that couldn't make it there, or they're fleeing prosecution, or they're carrying diseases and they're hoping that the free medical care wherever they're going. It's just not working out at all. And the globalists are pushing for this. They want everybody just blended together. And it's not working out. It really isn't. All right, we have to take another break for commercials. We've got a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And the corporate media is still going on about this NFL anthem thing. I mean, we're being contentized. They don't want to talk about what's going on in Yemen. They don't want to talk about what's going on in Syria. So, yes, those gosh darn NFL players, they're still kneeling for the anthem. That's what's important. That's what you need to think about today. All right, we're going to go to the phones here to Mitchell in Memphis. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, what's going on? Listen, it really bothers me that you and some of the callers, it's just a constant discussion of how bad government is. This is why I've assumed the voluntarist position. Do you remember the Lysander Spooner quote, "But whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we have had, or it has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist." He was observing that this thing didn't work way back before the Civil War.
Well, Thomas Jefferson, when he set up the countries, he didn't expect it to last more than 100 years. He expected that, because of accumulating corruption and the natural inclinations of those who seek power, that it would have to be brought down and reformed yet again. A little revolution.
Can I share something with you?
Say again?
Can I share something with you?
What's that?
There's a guy named Jeff Berwick, and he has a show called Anarchast. He also heads up the Anarchapulco Festival or gathering every year, and it's doubling in size. They're projecting 7,000 people in Acapulco this February.
Okay. But
he has a show, and on this show, he always asks the person, "When did you become an anarchist or a voluntarist?" And he, on his show, published on August 4th, 2018, the Anarchast episode 428. Here's the title of it if people want to go to YouTube. From Congress to Anarchist, Cynthia McKinney, on how to free the people. And by the way, she said her son, Coy McKinney, turned her on to anarchism. She paid for him to study to be an attorney, and he forgot it. He said he didn't want to do it. And he's now, I think, an organic gardener. By the way, Anarchast episode 228, G. Edward Griffin, the Creature from Jekyll Island guy, Edward Griffin was born in 1931. He's 86 years old, and at the ripe age of 83 or so years old, he's on the Anarchast talking to Jeff Berwick, and Jeff Berwick says, "When did you become an anarchist?" G. Edward Griffin is now an anarchist. At the age of 83, he finally realized this stuff, the lifelong documentarian and so on and so forth. He finally realized this thing doesn't work. And by the way, Ron Paul is on Anarchast talking about voluntarism is the ultimate goal we should strive for. That's Anarchast episode 374, published August 18, 2017. The History of Anarchy, Anarchast episode of 2011, Anarchast, let's see what episode it is, episode 7. It's one of the first ones, The History of Anarchism with Lou Rockwell. One of your favorites.
Okay.
Part 1. And
Mitchell, can you
Judge Napolitano?
Can you sum up? Can you
Anyway,
sort of get to
there's
the
a lot
point?
of good company. I wish that we could spend some more time talking about solutions, which is a voluntary society, instead of constantly belaboring the fact that we're being screwed over by all these people in government. We get it. We understand that. It's bad.
Okay,
Now let's
well,
do some solutions.
Okay, well, I'm not advocating revolution. I don't want to see blood in the streets, although that's already starting to happen here right now.
No, it is.
What I think is going to happen, I think the United States government is headed for a Soviet Union-style collapse, and my advice to everybody listening to this show and reading my website is to prepare for that crash, because there's going to be a few rough months getting through that while the nation gets reformed, and we'll come out the other side in a much better condition than we are right now, again, looking at the Russian republics.
I hope that you're right, Mike. I hope it collapses and we can start over in some form or fashion. The problem is you've also said that these crazy lunatics in these powerful seats of power of government could possibly start World War III, and I think your words, vaporize the surface of the earth. And by the way, our tax dollars didn't afford us the luxury of having a bunker.
Yes.
So, yes, we can wait on Russia to have Russian-style collapse, but in the meantime, in the interim period, we might just be vaporized. Why don't we all just quit playing the game of believing in the religion of government? I thought you said you were an atheist. You do believe in the God of government.
No, I don't. No, I don't. I consider this government to be illegitimate ever since it strayed off the Constitution. Okay? They're not doing the job they're supposed to be doing.
I don't want to argue with you, Mike. I'll just say this: there are more and more people throwing their hands up. Some of them can't articulate. Some can articulate it better than others. But a lot of people know this doesn't work. From Lysander Spooner all the way up to 2018. And when you have Ron Paul and Cynthia McKinney, and these people are point blank saying, "I am a voluntarist anarchist," that's amazing to me. And more people are coming to this point of view because this system of government and state and so on and so forth, these people have special power that the rest of us don't. It doesn't work. In this age of exposure,
well, it works
many
for them.
of us
It
are
doesn't
waking
work
up
for
to
us. Anyway, Mitchell, thank you for the phone call, and we're going to let you go.
Thank you, Mike.
Get on back here to the news here. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and the lovely Lady Claire. Okay, well, apparently Boris Johnson got himself into a little bit of hot water when he made a comment about women in burqas. And he was trying to be funny, and he said they look like either bank robbers or postal boxes. And it triggered a furious debate. Now, quite a few of the countries in the EU ban the burqa. But Tory progressive Ruth Davidson thinks the burqa ought to be treated as a religious symbol, like the crucifix. Well, Ruth, the burqa isn't a religious symbol. It's a piece of clothing. And so that's a little bit over the top. That's like saying, my sweater or my baseball cap should be treated on the same level as a crucifix or a Star of David or whatever. Really doesn't make sense. Oddly enough, a lot of people are supporting Boris Johnson, including a senior British imam who's out there saying that, yeah, the burqa should be banned because it's a hideous, tribal, ninja-like garment that oppresses women. And it is. There's no question that it is. And interestingly enough, a poll conducted by the corporate media finds the public backs Boris Johnson. They don't see the burqa comment as racist, and they say, yes, it should be banned. So, anyway, all right, let's talk about Facebook banning censorship. It really is getting out of control. And by the way, somebody sent me an email saying that, yes, some of these email providers have in the past been caught censoring their own, censoring the email that passes through their systems, including Google and America Online. So, a story coming on out of Prison Planet, the bizarre Facebook path to corporate fascism. And it's basically saying these social media corporations have assumed political police powers. And apparently they work to disrupt a planned counter-demonstration against white supremacism set for August 12th in Washington on the grounds that it was initiated and inspired by Russians as part of a Kremlin campaign to slow dissension in the U.S. Well, and again, absolutely no proof of any of this. So, now Facebook has deplatformed yet another media outlet. It's Venezuela's only independent grassroots English media platform. Venezuela Analysis. And the problem here is that this website was pretty much the only source to get information on what's actually happening on the ground in Venezuela. And the people who run the website are saying it hasn't been made clear to them what they did that prompted the move. All they got was the usual form letter. Their page had been unpublished due to recent activity that doesn't follow the Facebook page themes. And Venezuela Analysis is saying it's just a naked attempt to block grassroots coverage of the on-the-ground situation in Venezuela. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So that now all we'll hear about Venezuela will be what CNN and MSNBC and ABC and the rest of them tell us. That's what's happening in Venezuela. Take our word for it. Apparently, Mark Dice is now in the crosshairs on YouTube censorship, so's Brittany Hughes. It really is a purge out there. Now, Alex Jones has come on out with a challenge. The glove is up, saying CNN is trying to intimidate companies into wiping us off the internet. Defend free speech. Don't let the bullies win. Apparently, Alex Jones is convinced that this is really all coming from CNN. And it's all about shutting down competition. But I think, again, as with any major event, there's a lot of players who are in on this thing, who want the independent media silenced. Vaccine makers, GMO, the government, the corporate media. Now, apparently, interestingly enough, Google searches for InfoWars have skyrocketed after the purge. Something like 1,300% in the past week. And Alex Jones' popularity has spiked. What's happening here is what's called the banned in Boston effect, and it's an old theater term, where if you were mounting a play and you were going to take it on tour, you'd go to Boston. And at that time, Boston was really uptight, really strict, and they say, oh, you can't show this to the people. We're going to ban you in Boston. Golden advertising, because the rest of the country now would want to see what it was that so upset the people or the government of Boston. And it was actually a blessing to be banned in Boston. And that's what they've just done to Alex Jones. Now, Facebook web traffic has basically halved in just 2 years, and most of the losses are the younger users who are flocking to alternatives. Somebody actually is now starting to ask, this is over at Investment Watch blog, is the censorship of conservatives part of the reason why Facebook is losing massive amounts of traffic? I would say so. If Facebook and Google and YouTube were doing this, and nobody noticed it, like when they were shadow banning, they could get away with it. But now it's out in the open, and the American people see what's going on. They're not going to stay with these platforms knowing that they're trying to filter what they get to see, taking away your right to decide what you want to see, hear, and read. Now, a few days ago, Twitter was saying they weren't going to ban Alex Jones because he hadn't broken any rules. Apparently, now they're saying they're reviewing all of Alex Jones' tweets, which means they're now looking for a reason to shut him down. Peter Van Buren was banned for life from Twitter, apparently over a heated exchange over the media's complicity with the government. And in his article, he's basically talking about how the ACLU, which used to be this organization that stood up for freedom of speech, is now basically backing off. And they now apply a test to which free speech cases it will defend, weighing their impact on other issues. Apparently, the ACLU is now siding with those who believe speech should be secondary to other political goals. The ACLU is now saying censorship does have a place when it serves the greater good, with the ACLU deciding what is the greater good. Now, the people who are trying to censor the net are out there screaming hate speech, hate speech, hate speech at everybody. And by the way, a lot of that hate speech is being planted to try and build that up. But the reality is, hate speech, as objectionable as it is not actually prohibited according to the Supreme Court. Basically, we're going back to the McCarthy era, where you only had to label something communist to have it banned. Today, it's hate speech. Oh, you're banned. It's hate speech. What did I say? We don't know. We got a complaint. We don't have the time to check it out. But somebody complained you're engaging in hate speech, so you're banned. Everyone needs to start looking at moving to alternative social media. Kim.com is getting his Twitter replacement up and running. I'm looking for a new video platform to replace YouTube. I don't even use Facebook and Twitter. I haven't for a very long time. And DuckDuckGo as a search engine is doing really, really well. And I ran some test searches on it the other day. It's not filtering and it's not biasing. I got exactly what I wanted to get. I didn't get something else thrown up in front of it, like when I do about global warming denial. I didn't get, oh, you want to read about the proof that global warming is real, the way that YouTube is now doing. Okay, apparently there's a new warning out. You know all those satellites they have up in space, and they all got computers hooked into their radios. Apparently, one area where they have not really been looking at it too carefully is security. And now there is a concern that satellite systems used on aircraft, ships, and by the military could let hackers take control of them. And the worst bugs could let attackers overcharge the satellite antenna to damage the equipment or harm the operators. Others could be used to betray the exact location of military forces in crisis zones. Nobody was really thinking about this possibility. Okay, we're going to grab, well, we've got 2 phone calls waiting. I'm going to try and fit them in the last segment this hour before the Lady Claire comes on in. By the way, you've probably seen these new laptops where they don't have a separate power connector, that you can actually get a charger on a USB cord, plug it into the laptop, and it will charge through the USB-C port. The problem is these chargers are coming with built-in malware. And once it's plugged into the USB port, they can get into that machine. So I'm going to stay with a machine that's got a separate power cord. We're going to take a break for commercials, back with phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We've got callers waiting on the line. I'm going to try and get as many of these calls done before the Lady Claire shows up, starting with Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, well, two things, Mike. Mike, one is Kim.com serious? Hopefully he can do this. Maybe we can put both Twitter and even more Facebook out of business, send them the way of MySpace. The other thing I wanted to say is, as popular as Alex Jones is starting to become now, I wonder if he wouldn't consider running on a platform with Cynthia McKinney for the presidency, maybe in a third party in 2020. That would be super if he could do that. You know,
I'll back him.
What do you think?
I'll back him because I don't like any of the candidates shaping up in the two traditional parties here. Of course, you know, the system is rigged against third parties, but yeah, you're right. Alex Jones has got a huge support base.
Cynthia McKinney's become more and more popular too.
Yes.
If you notice, she's really, she really speaks out. She's not afraid to speak her mind. She spoke her mind when she was in Congress. And the good thing is, even though I think she's more kind of towards the left, she's very much in favor of the Second Amendment.
Yes.
She said that a few years ago, actually, when she came on Alex Jones' show. So that'd be super. And she's really more independent than anything else than left. So that's about it. You know?
All right, thanks.
I just want to about things.com. What you think?
Yeah, he's announced he's doing it. He's announced he's doing it. We're going to let you go and go to Daniel in British Columbia. Aloha, Daniel. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Michael. I'm a member of Gab, and it just got threatened by Microsoft Azure, which is a cloud-based
we reported on
system that they're gonna drop it over two posts that this ex-Marine who ran against Dianne Feinstein in California. His name is Patrick Little. I don't know what you think about what he's saying, but you know, it's like a slippery slope. Where do you know, if you say Palestinians have a right to live in their own land, then you're called an anti-Semite. So it just seems like, you know, if you ban this guy, then you got to ban. Where does it end? That's Sarah Jeong.
I'm a firm believer in the First Amendment.
She's worse than this guy.
You cannot have freedom of speech in an offense-free society. And that's what the liberals are pushing to undermine the First Amendment, that we don't want anybody's feelings to be hurt, and so we must censor the speech. But that's a ridiculous idea. I mean, liberals live to be offended. It's part of their identity. You're never going to see a happy liberal. Their self-image is of being miserable and being offended by everything around them. So for me, there shouldn't be any censorship whatsoever.
Yeah, you have the ability on Gab to just block someone. So I think they're worried about this guy because he stood in a Holocaust museum with a sign that says, Jews rape kids and stuff like that. Which I mean, it's over the top.
He's an agent provocateur. He's an agent provocateur.
Okay. Anyways, maybe you and Claire can discuss this when in her segment. Thanks.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And Neil, I'm sorry, we're out of time, and we're going to close the lines, at least for the first part of Claire being on the air here. So I apologize that I didn't get to Neil here. But yeah, a lot of these really outrageous people who do things like that, go to the Holocaust Museum, hold up a sign, they're paid to do that so that they can be used as an excuse to go after those of us who are trying to be a little bit more civil. There's the music. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. We're going to close the phone lines for a while here. We may open them a little bit later in the hour. But for those of you watching on YouTube, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire. So, Lady Claire, what's the first thing you want to talk about?
I'd like to talk about something happening very currently in Vietnam. Now, what the Vietnamese government has done has been to arrest Deputy Security Minister in an unprecedented anti-corruption campaign, something that makes you look and go, wow, okay?
Yep.
And in a move that has stunned Vietnamese society, authorities in Hanoi have arrested one of the country's most powerful security officials, allegedly for helping a business tycoon and former intelligence agent escape abroad. The move is described as unprecedented in modern Vietnamese history, and it signals a widening of the anti-corruption campaign that has started in 2016 and is now affecting Vietnam's powerful intelligence agencies. Now, Mike, Vietnam boasts one of Asia's fastest growing economies, but that growth has been severely hampered by corruption, which is endemic in the communist country of 93 million. In its most recent Corruption Perceptions Index, Transparency International ranked Vietnam 107th out of the world's 180 countries, and behind nations like Colombia, Albania, and Zambia. And you know, I'm thinking about this. It's too bad that U.S. government officials are not rooting out the insane and extreme corruption of its own security apparatus officials.
Well,
that
Trump
would
did
be a
fire
sight.
Comey. That was a good start,
Yeah.
but he didn't go far enough.
No, he didn't. You know, and I just have to wonder where the U.S. government is on this list by Business Transparency. I would imagine it's not that close to the top. Would you?
I actually, the last time I heard, it's definitely sinking down.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing about ICE. Apparently, a man was arrested for soliciting the murder of ICE agents and threatening to slit Senator John McCain's throat. Now, the guy is facing a 5-year prison term for inciting violence against federal agents and politicians. Now, beside offering $500 for the head of an ICE agent, the suspect urged someone to slit the throat of John McCain. Now, law enforcement agents arrested Brandon Zibrowski from Cambridge, Massachusetts on Thursday morning in New York. The 33-year-old was charged with 1 count of use of interstate and foreign commerce to transmit a threat to injure another person. Now, he registered with a reader's name, called on more than 400, let me repeat that number, 400 of his Twitter followers to commit violent crimes against U.S. public officials. And besides repeated calls to slit the throat of Senator John McCain from Arizona, the suspect is also being accused of murder for hire. Now, Mike, this is where we are right now. Welcome to Maxine's Water America, folks, where the attempted assassination of law enforcement and government officials represents the new normal. That's what they're supposed to be doing. And, you know, looking back at that brilliant and pivotal and wonderful Martin Luther King speech, when Reverend King gave that speech, I Have a Dream in D.C., I got to tell you, I'm pretty sure that this was not what he was talking about.
I don't think he'd be very pleased at all with what's going on these days.
Yeah. And apparently there was kind of a brouhaha to which this lady is singularly unaccustomed. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert refused to condemn Thursday's coalition airstrike on a school bus in Yemen. Now, this strike left as many as 50 people dead and 63 injured, and the vast majority were children, little ones, trying to get whatever education you can possibly get in Yemen, which I can't imagine is great. And as Zero Hedge reported previously, Saudi, UK, U.S. coalition jets scored a direct hit on the school bus packed with children as it drove through a crowded marketplace in Dayan in the rebel-held north of the country.
Now, mind you, this is an attack on non-combatants.
Yeah.
And that is a war crime. And that's why the UN General Secretary is calling for an independent investigation.
Mm-hmm. And during the State Department's daily press briefing, Nauert was asked point blank by journalists, and God bless him, started with AP's Matt Lee, whether the U.S. condemned the attack. And apparently the whole exchange is worth watching, especially as Matt Lee lays out the case for direct U.S. complicity in the attack on a bus packed with children from the start of his questions. And he said, the Saudis obviously are the ones who conducted this, but did they do that with weapons supplied by the U.S. and training supplied by the U.S., and with targeting data supplied by the U.S.? How can something like this happen, he said. And there was, we need to do a shout-out.
Yeah, we need to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network.
Okay.
And there's the issue. They can say, the Saudis were doing this, but it's U.S.-supplied weapons, U.S.-supplied support, U.S.-supplied targeting data.
Yeah.
So, to me, unless somebody's going to say that it was just a hideous accident, then they intended to bomb that market square.
And the kids.
And they caught the bus in it.
Yeah, yeah. And apparently, the State Department's Heather Nauert is not willing to condemn the Saudis for their airstrike on the school bus. She wants to wait for the Saudis to conduct their own investigation.
Well, I know how that's going to come on out. Those children all committed suicide. They
Yes.
were really, really depressed.
Of course,
you know.
of course. And now this, to me, I just want to vomit. Now we're tried to obfuscate the issue by saying, I can't confirm all the details because we were not there on the ground. Not only did she refuse to say the State Department condemned the attack, but wouldn't so much as agree to simply call for an independent investigation into the incident. She only called for a Saudi-led inquiry. Now, equivocating and lying are Nauert's most precious and valuable skills. In her mind, Mike, I am quite certain that these wounded kids were just collateral damage. Didn't matter in the grander scheme of things. But as you said, this assassination of children is a war crime, pure and simple. And do you know what I want to happen with this lady?
Mm-hmm.
I want her airlifted to the place where she has to go on the ground and look at these children who've been killed or maimed for life. That's what I'd like to see, just how dispassionate she can be at that point.
Oh, remember Madeleine Albright, you know.
Oh, it's worth it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, the other comment was, you know, why should I busy my beautiful little mind with that? Or was that Barbara Bush?
That was Barbara Bush.
That was Barbara Bush.
That was Barbara Bush.
Okay.
Yeah. And going back to the U.S. and the penal system here in this country, which is engineered to fail. And this article comes to us from blacklistednews.com. How Florida's prison and DRM made $11.3 million worth of prisoners' music disappear. Now, they used to use what's called Access Corrections $100 MP3 players to listen to their music, purchase, and access their other digital files. But the Department of Corrections in Florida has terminated its contract with Access Corrections in favor of the notorious industry leader JPay, a company that once claimed ownership of inmates' correspondence with their families and had inmates who violated the company's lengthy terms of service punished with solitary confinement, and became notorious for selling digital postal stamps to prisoners who want to message their loved ones. Prisoners need to spend 1 postage stamp per page of electronic text, and the price of postage stamps always goes up around Mother's Day. Well, you know, go figure. And apparently this JPay is a notorious division of Securus, which was known for selling and even giving away access to U.S. and Canadian cell phone location data without a warrant and without notice to the tracked individuals. Now, neither company, JPay nor Access Corrections, have offered prisoners any way to move their music purchases from their old device to the new ones. And prison rules ban prisoners from owning more than 1 device at a time. So even if prisoners wanted to keep their Access Connection devices without the ability to buy new music, they do so at the cost of not being able to use a JPay device, which would severely curtail their access to correspondence with family members, in addition to cutting off access to reading material, educational material, and other electronic sources. Now, Mike, if I understand this correctly, there is no technical reason here why the files cannot be transferred.
I wouldn't see where there would be. I mean, they're just ordinary MP3s.
Yeah.
You know, it's a matter of either hooking the devices together or copying the first device onto an intermediate machine and then plugging the second device in and copying it back out. But, you know, JPay is just taking advantage of these people who are already in prison. They're obviously working in the prison factory, and they're being gouged for what little money they're making.
And it may just be a coincidence that JPay stands to earn fresh millions from prisoners repurchasing their music, and that the prison system stands to earn millions more in commission. But whatever the reason, the whole thing is just completely unfair, and it imposes millions in cost on the struggling and innocent families of incarcerated people. Now, the Florida Department of Corrections is already earning record sums, a killing, if you will, taking a cut from every time a prisoner's family pays to transfer money into the prisoner's JPay account.
Okay, so that's where they're getting the money.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And Mike, it makes me think, in Florida and elsewhere in the U.S., prisoners are never rehabilitated nor given the opportunity to return to a better life because they are unto themselves a profit center in the state in which they're incarcerated. The system nationwide is engineered to fail.
Yeah, that you're right. It's become another scam.
Yeah, yeah. And if now I have a hug and a punch with the work of Michael Moore, as you know.
Yes.
But his film, Who Do We Invade Next, was absolutely priceless.
That one was brilliant.
I
did like that
When he talked about incarceration in other countries like Sweden, and where people, I mean, it looks like a dormitory. It doesn't look, there are no huge bars anywhere, and it's on an island, so they have nowhere to go.
Yeah. It looked like a village.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just...
Yeah. And I remember looking at that and thinking, these people are being treated like people who could someday get out of the system, go back to their lives, go back to their families, go back to their kids, their moms and their dads, and go back and integrate with society. But in the U.S., it appears to be, just the absolute opposite.
Once you're in the system, they keep you in there.
Yeah.
Do you know that these prison factory companies will literally have a contract where it says that the police force for the state or the court system guarantees a minimum number of prisoners will be locked up in these prison factories, or the state has to pay a penalty. So there's a financial incentive to just, grab kids and arrest them.
Yeah.
That could have been the motive behind this stupid thing the Chicago police did that's got the neighborhood riled up, where they took a truck full of Nike shoes. The back was left open. It was parked on the side. They were just waiting for some kids to come on over and grab the shoes so they could be arrested.
It was entrapment.
Yep.
It was entrapment.
It was entrapment.
And now let's go to our dear Vice President, Michael Pence. Michael Pence says America's Space Force will seek peace through strength. Insert ominous music here. Vice President Pence delivered a speech on Thursday outlining President Trump's vision of a Space Force, an idea that Trump has repeatedly riffed about at rallies over the last several months. And what he said, now the time has come to write the next great chapter in the history of our armed forces to prepare for the next battlefield, where America's best and bravest will be called to deter and defeat a new generation of threats to our people and to our nation. Pence said the time has come to establish the United States Space Force.
It sounds like it's out of a cheap 1950s science fiction movie.
Oh, yeah. Heinlein could have written it. Described by the Vice President as a new sixth branch of the armed forces, separate but equal to the other branches, the Space Force would be tasked with confronting the new battlefield of outer space. And my response to this is no, Mr. Vice President. This program is engineered to play catch-up against those weapons Russia and China already have, against which the U.S. military has no present defense, and there are a ton of them, Mike.
Well, again, it's just a cash grab, and war in near-Earth orbit could literally isolate us.
Yeah.
If everything starts blowing up and destroying each other, it would be like a domino effect.
Yeah.
We could find ourselves unable to go into space for hundreds of years.
That could be very counterproductive.
But, people who do war, they don't think long-term.
Yeah.
They win the war now, and then they take the unused chemical weapons, they just dump them in the ocean.
Yeah.
They're using depleted uranium. They don't care what it's going to do to the population after the war's over. It's just, we've got to win, and we've got to win now.
Yeah.
But it's going to be hugely expensive, and to be very honest, I think it's a bad idea.
Yeah, I do too. Mike, did you go over this first couple of hours?
No, I didn't.
Okay. The Russian Prime Minister Medvedev has said new U.S. sanctions would be a declaration of economic war against Russia. And Russia's Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev warned that the United States on Friday that Russia would regard any U.S. move to curb the activities of its bank as a declaration of economic war against which it would retaliate. And he says our American friends should make no mistake about it. Medvedev also noticed that Russia has a long history of surviving economic restrictions and never caved in to pressure in the past. Our country has been living under constant pressure through sanctions for the last 100 years, he said, accusing the U.S. and its allies of employing sanctions to undercut global competition. Like, for example, declaring that Crimea was annexed by Russia, which never happened.
Yeah.
Never happened. He also said that that the U.S. targeting Russia's gas exports to Europe, Washington wants to push its own LNG, liquid natural gas shipments to the continent. It's absolutely non-market anti-competition measure aimed at strangling our capacities.
That's exactly what it is.
I mean, come on, guys.
That's exactly what it is. And I'm starting to get this idea. Trump's idea of making America great is to knock the rest of the world down.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and the question is, can they do that? And Medvedev also pointed out that the U.S. is simultaneously imposing tariffs on China, and the Chinese obviously don't like it. No one does. And in a companion story that comes out of whatdoesitmean.com comes the following headline, originally from Sputnik. U.S. establishment push sanctions to derail Ron Paul's mission to Russia. Did you go over Rand Paul's mission to Russia? Did you go over that earlier?
I mentioned it just in passing in relation to another article about this mixed message that Russia must be getting, where Rand Paul takes this handwritten note saying we want to have closer relations. Then they get the note from the State Department saying we're hitting you with sanctions over the Sergei Skripal situation. It's definitely an attempt to derail any possibility of ratcheting down the situation.
And what this article is saying is that President Donald Trump's enemies have helped launch new sanctions against Moscow that were timed to undermine this bid by Rand Paul to mend relations during his trip to Russia this week. And this comes from former Foreign Service officer and advisor to Senate Republicans leaders, Jim Jatras. That's what he told Sputnik. On Wednesday, the U.S. State Department rolled out 2 rounds of anti-Russian sanctions over the Skripal affair. The first will be implemented the 22nd of this month, and the second round 3 months later unless Russia gives an agreement to chemical weapons inspection.
Russia's never going to do that.
That's not going to happen. But look at the timing, okay? The second round is going to be 3 months later. And in 3 months, we have that November 4th drop-dead date by which no country on the planet is supposed to buy Iranian oil. Okay?
Okay, well, we're going to have to take a break here for commercials.
Okay. Alrighty.
And we'll be right back with the show after these few words.
Okay.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before Claire does her next story, we're watching on the corporate media those horrible, horrible fires out in California. And apparently they've arrested 2 arsonists. So I don't know why they set the fires, but 2 of them are in jail and there may be more. I remember when I was a kid, again, farm country, New Hampshire, we had a summer when there was a firebug running around. That's what they called him back then. It was just somebody who just got excited playing with fire. Mm-hmm. And this one was burning down barns, or maybe it was an insurance fraud scam. I don't know. Anyway, get on back to your stories here.
Apparently, the UK is poised to demand extradition of Russian suspects in the Salisbury nerve agent attack. And apparently, the British government has prepared 2 extradition requests to Moscow for people they claim carried out the Salisbury nerve agent, according to The Guardian, citing Whitehall and security sources. And Mike, I'm looking at this and I'm shaking my head and I'm thinking that Prime Minister May has gone absolutely barking mad on this. And I believe it is to misdirect, just like a squid throws ink, against the very badly designed Brexit talks. You know, why would the Russians would have done this at this point in time? Mike, this would have been both insane and illogical.
Well, we made that point a little bit earlier in the show, but I don't agree with you that this is just to distract from Brexit, although Brexit's definitely not going good. Mm-hmm. Don't forget, the United States just hit Russia with sanctions over this very case.
No, it was Skripal, wasn't it? Or was it Salisbury? I thought it was over the Skripal case. 2 cases.
Well, yeah, but by saying we have suspects and we want to extradite them from Russia, you know, they're providing support to the story here. Now, Russia, of course, is not going to extradite anybody until somebody comes up with some evidence of actual wrongdoing, which is not going to happen.
No, they have no evidence. All they've got is bluster and charges.
Yep.
And apparently in China, there has been a new Chinese military video. It's called War in Front of Me, showing off the range of advanced weaponry.
It's actually a very well done video, and the first part of it is basically showing Chinese soldiers having to leave their families to go on up.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it shows the array of new weapons that they have. But it's a really good quality production. They put a lot of work into this one.
Yeah. One of the articles I read stated that the video further appeals to masculine sense of duty and sacrificial hardship, as there are a series of scenes, as you mentioned, depicting men saying tearful goodbyes to their children and their spouses, after which infantry soldiers give fierce battle cries while waving the communist national flag, interspersed with overhead shots of huge intercontinental ballistic missiles in a silo and an aircraft carrier battle group. And the narration includes the first lines, "Peace behind me, war in front of me, pick up the steel gun. We must let go of the children."
Yep.
And in a further development, apparently today, China fired 6 warning shots to the U.S. Navy in the South China Sea.
They weren't shots.
What were they?
The headline is a little misleading. They were radio warnings.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
And it was a U.S. Navy P-8A Poseidon jet, was flying at 16,500 feet to get a view of low-lying coral reefs that have been turned into garrisons with 5-story buildings, etc., etc. And there was, I guess, a bullhorn saying, "U.S. military aircraft, this is China, leave immediately, and keep out to avoid any misunderstanding."
No, they didn't use a bullhorn, not from 16,000 feet down.
All right.
There are internationally agreed upon channels for radio communication.
So this was not a bullhorn. This was an electronic bullhorn.
Yeah, this was over the radio.
Yeah.
And
Mike, how long do you think before China is going to uncork because they're so unhappy with the U.S. policy here?
It's only a matter of time before somebody just gets fed up with all of this dancing around and just says, let's go for it. And it could happen by accident. I mean, that NATO plane that fired a live missile at the Russian border.
In Estonia? Hello. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can we? Oh, never mind.
Okay.
We're fine.
All right.
Yeah. Somebody makes a mistake in a situation like that, it's going to get out of control.
Yeah.
One of the problems we have with all this computerized warfighting equipment is that it could take off beyond human control.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happened when the USS Vincennes shot down the Iranian passenger jet.
Yes, I remember that all those years ago.
The captain had just turned his key to enable, and the computer just took over, and the passenger jet was dead before anybody could do anything about it.
Yikes.
The same thing with TWA 800.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Are we about at a break?
We will be in about 20 seconds here.
Okay, all righty.
And
because I'd like to tease this into the next segment.
Okay, well, go ahead and tease away.
All right. Apparently, North Korea threatens to disrupt the tranquility of the region.
And we actually did mention this briefly earlier in the program because North Korea was waiting for some kind of gesture from the U.S. Of appreciation, and instead they got hit with more sanctions.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back.
Exposure to the sunburn.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
Sorry about that. We were just making a joke about the fact that NASA is sending a mission to the sun, and everybody's concerned about how the spacecraft could burn up from all the heat. And I said, well, the solution is obvious. Just go at night. So, little NASA humor there.
Yes.
All right. Go ahead, your next story.
Thank you. Apparently, the U.S. Appeals Court has ordered the EPA to ban a pesticide said to harm children. Well, it's not only children it harms, it's bees, which are critical for pollination of the crops.
Yes.
And it was a divided federal appeals court yesterday that ordered the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to ban a widely used pesticide that critics say can harm children and farmers. Now, it was a 2-1 decision by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. There's a lot this group has done that I have not been able to be comfortable with, but I think they did the right thing in this case, Mike. They overturned former EPA Commissioner Scott Pruitt's March 2017 denial of a petition by environmental groups to ban the use of chlorpyrifos on food crops such as fruits, vegetables, and nuts. And this shows that the EPA can't just ignore the science that this pesticide damages children's brains. And this was said by Marisa Ordoño, a lawyer for Earth Justice, which represented the petitioners, and she said this in an interview. The Trump administration has to follow the law, as does everyone else. And Pruitt's ruling, one of many by the administration to reduce federal regulation oversight, had previously reversed a 2015 Obama administration recommendation to extend a food 2000 ban on chlorpyrifos that covered most households.
That was a typo
setting.
there.
Yes. Yeah. Apparently, writing for the Seattle-based appeals court, Judge Jed Rakoff directed the EPA to ban chlorpyrifos within 60 days, saying the agency failed to counteract scientific evidence that its residue on food causes neurodevelopmental damage to kids. And unless, Mike, neurodevelopmental damage to kids is what the U.S. government wants, and one has to wonder, given how educational programs in this country seek to indoctrinate rather than educate, this poison should not be sprayed on anyone's potential food, period, end of discussion.
Unfortunately, we are in an age where large corporations are selling products that are not always effective, are very often dangerous, but because they're generous contributors to Congress, it's a corrupted system.
Yeah.
And as long as it's making money and the money continues to be shared, these corporations are allowed to get away with it.
Yeah.
Now, I know the small family farms have the option of going back to natural organic methods. But it is, I mean, what you're dealing with here when you're dealing with pesticides, they are a poison.
Yeah.
Okay? There's no getting around it. They are a poison. Supposedly they're designed to be poisonous against a specific life form, but not against you. In fact, Monsanto's big claim when glyphosate came out was that it was highly toxic, but only against plants. That has since been disproved, I might add.
1,000,000 times. And let's go over to our wonderful, much-loved telecom companies.
Oh, yes.
Comcast breach exposes 26.5 million customers' Social Security's number and partial addresses. Apparently, its Xfinity's login page had an easily found bug that allowed anyone to gain access to the Social Security numbers and partial home addresses of over 26 million customers.
Well, good thing we don't use the Xfinity login page.
Yeah. Their spokesapologist, that's a new word, yes, David McGuire, says the company patched the bug quickly after being notified of its existence by security researcher Ryan Stevenson, and added that the company takes our customers' security very seriously, adding that the company didn't think anyone had exploited the bug.
Oh, how could they know that?
Yeah, and I'm going to make a guess here. The result was one of many of the mergers and acquisitions that allowed Comcast to grow to become the country's largest and most hated cable operator, as they put growth and profits ahead of integration and security. It's just a guess. Merging IT systems is one of the most notoriously tricky and insecure things a corporation can do. Mike,
yeah, that's definitely a real possibility. Yeah, that's definitely a real possibility. Or, you know, somebody goes to work in the IT department of a large corporation, they get access to the source code, they plant the bug, the back door, then they go punch out their boss and get fired, then they go on home and they start siphoning out all the data.
Right. You know, and I have to think, and I have to share, Comcast has a real close second in being the most hated cable operators to Spectrum, which promises in their multi-billion-dollar advertising so much access, but never actually really delivers it, as you and I know.
Yes.
Mike, what do they promise us and what do they actually deliver us?
We pay for 300 megabits per second download speed, and we're getting about 60, which is enough to do what we're doing, but that's entirely beside the point.
Yeah.
And I have been round and around with Spectrum. You know, I'll take I take the cable right out of the cable modem, plug it into a laptop, and run these internet speed tests, and it's always the same. And they keep saying, oh, no, it's got to be at your end. It's got to be at your end. Meanwhile, what's really annoying is we kept getting emails promoting Spectrum's business class internet, which they promise will be a lot faster. Well, if we're not getting what we were promised on our home service, we're certainly not going to go with the business class.
No, definitely not.
Yep.
Definitely not. Going back to another interesting situation, the Easter Island people want return of their sacred statue stolen by Imperial Britain. The Rapa Nui people of Easter Island are asking the British Museum to return one of the island's sacred moai statues stolen 150 years ago by British sailors. It is apparently one of many artifacts looted by the UK in its imperial days.
Well, that's what the British Museum is full of.
Yeah,
Stuff that they've looted from other countries, like the Elgin marbles.
Yeah, and it was presented to Queen Victoria in 1869. She, in turn, gifted it to the British Museum. And no moai statue has been precisely dated, but they are estimated to be at least 400 years old. Now, this one's name is Ho Hakanania, ironically, and it's been translated as lost or stolen friend, among other variants. Dear people of Rapa Nui, I wish you the best possible luck with this, but you are probably going to need a lawsuit and an attorney like someone with the star power of Amal Clooney to potentially get you out of this one, because she is attempting to negotiate in behalf of the Greek government for a return of the Elgin ivories.
Yes.
Yeah.
Marbles.
Marble, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And here's something that our liberal friends are going to love.
Yes.
NAACP poll, Black American support for Donald Trump surges. A poll conducted by the NAACP shows that Black people support for President Trump sits at 21%, which, according to the Washington Examiner, is more than double his support in an April poll conducted by Reuters. Oh, Mike, the ashtrays are going to be flying tonight at the DNC. Everything that they are trying to do to get this president out of office is kind of exploding like a bad trick cigar.
Well, there's another poll that's really going to upset them. Apparently, support for Trump among Hispanics is climbing.
Yeah.
Now, whether they're polling the illegal immigrants or not, but it's an indicator that the Hispanics are not going to vote Democrat.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Democrats really didn't improve the job market when they were last in power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Mike, did you cover this the first 2 hours, the handwritten notes exposing?
Nope, I didn't.
Okay,
I
all
didn't.
right, okay. Apparently, there are handwritten notes exposing what Fusion GPS told the DOJ about Trump. And there was a memory stick, an admission of a Hail Mary leak, and an unmistakable push to push the Russian investigation closer to Donald Trump's inner circle with uncorroborated facts. These are just some of the highlights from the day that Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson, paid by Hillary's campaign to dig up dirt on her GOP rival, met secretly with a top Justice Department official right after Trump won the 2016 election. And it was all captured in the official's handwritten notes, a contemporaneous record that intelligence professionals tells the author of this article exposes the flaws plaguing the early Russian collusion case. For example, Simpson told then Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr during the December 10, 2016 meeting in Washington in a coffee shop that he believed that Trump's longtime lawyer was the go-between from Russia to the Trump campaign. Yet Simpson allegedly acknowledged that most of the information GPS and British intelligence operative Christopher Steele, heard that name before, developed did not come from sources inside Moscow. Much of the collection about the Trump campaign's ties to Russia comes from an alleged former Russian intelligence officer, not entirely clear, who lives in the U.S., which Orr scribbled in his notes. And in those notes, Orr repeatedly misspells Simpson's first name as Glenn.
With
Now,
one N.
Yeah, and
But
here's
there was
the
another
deal.
place in the notes
Yeah.
where Simpson basically says they had no sources in Russia.
Yeah. So they have no sources. How did they go forward to get a court case, a FISA case against Trump, when Clinton paid for the dossier, which was used by the FISA court to initiate against the Trump campaign? And it didn't matter to her or any of the DNC that none of these charges had any base in reality.
No.
Yeah.
They're politicians. They're
Yeah.
professional liars.
Yeah. And it's all
it's just
about
get your enemy.
Yeah, it's all about getting Trump with a trial that is potentially going to play out beyond the 2018 midterms to ensure that the majority in the House were Democrats so they could begin impeachment charges against Trump.
Well, I think what they're going to do, the first thing, is they're going to shut down all these House investigations.
Yeah.
Because the Democrats will now be in charge of the committees.
Mhm.
But again, they can scream impeachment, 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 but they've got to have a high crime
Yeah.
or a misdemeanor
Yeah.
and proof thereof. You can't impeach somebody just because you don't like them.
Mhm.
This isn't like down in West Virginia where the entire state Supreme Court is being impeached for provable corruption.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. And let's go over to SecDef Mattis and where he's off to. Apparently, Pentagon Chief Mattis, Pentagon SecDef, yes, Mattis, leaves for trip to South America on August 12th. And he'll be visiting Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and Colombia. And Secretary of Defense Mattis embarks Sunday, August 12th, on his first trip to South America while leading the Department of Defense. That was a Freudian slip. Sorry. The White House declared 2018 the Year of the Americas, and the Secretary's trip underscores the department's strong defense ties with Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and Colombia. What, of course, Mike, is not mentioned here is the real reason for the trip, to figure out how to topple Maduro's in Venezuela after the botched drone attack.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's got to be very high on everyone's list. Also, something that you will not see in the prostitute or correspondence media. Apparently, 60,000 Pakistani troops are headed toward the Durand Line with Afghanistan to improve border security along the Durand Line with Afghanistan. And they're going to use the troops to expand patrols on the heavily disputed border region to curb the flow of terrorists operating between both nations. Now, the military officials requested anonymity for sharing this, and they informed Bloomberg that about 40% of the troops needed have already been recruited, with the total process taking up to 2 years. About 13% of the security fence along the 1,456-mile-long border has been erected. This is a lot of guys.
That is a lot of guys.
60,000?
Yep.
Apparently, the Pakistani leadership sees no other way out other than using more force to try to resolve intrusions at its border.
Okay.
What's up?
I'm just sending a message to our control room.
Okay, all right. And I'd like to go on.
Please.
Apparently,
Don't wait for me.
Iraq's election results unchanged by recount. Sadr's bloc retains plurality after the recount after the election. The ordered manual recount of the votes from May's parliamentary election have finished with the results broadly unchanged. Fewer than a dozen seats changed hands out of 329, and cleric Motakta al-Sadr's bloc retained the plurality the way they did before. Now, Mike, this has to be the U.S. government's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Because remember, Moqtada al-Sadr was the guy who told the U.S. that if one soldier extended their stay by 1 minute after the SOFA agreement with Iraq had them leaving, that there were fair game for the Mahdi army. And he could reconstitute the band very quickly in a very short period of time if they don't like what they see Americans doing in this country.
Yeah, they very much could here. And basically, the United States has now lost control of Iraq. And like Syria, they're basically in somebody else's country without permission.
Yeah. And this brings me over to Turkey. Turkish pro-government lawyers are seeking arrest of U.S. troops at Incirlik Air Base. This is a biggie. A group of lawyers assigned to Turkish President Recep Erdogan has filed formal charges against a number of U.S. Air Force officers who are stationed in Turkey's Incirlik Air Base. The complaint accuses them of having ties to terrorist groups and being in league with the banned Gulenist organization. And ever since the failed Cuckoo Kachu in 2016, Erdogan has blamed this cleric and accused the U.S. troops of being for him. Now, this is being treated by analysts who are saying the charges are a direct response to last week's imposition of sanctions against 2 Turkish cabinet members by the U.S. The sanctions were imposed in protest of Turkey's dissension of American pastor Andrew Brunson, who has been held since 2016 on accusations of Gulenist ties. And so, Mike, I've got to wonder, with these sanctions and counter-arrests, is the U.S. looking to go to war with Turkey, considering the sanctions they've placed against them?
I think the U.S. is looking to go to war with everybody.
Yeah.
You know, and it is utter insanity.
Yeah.
But again, all these sanctions, all they're doing is they're isolating the United States diplomatically and economically from the rest of the world.
Yeah. And with this development, there is a current crisis in Turkey, and Erdogan is calling on citizens to sell dollars and buy lira amidst the collapse of Turkey's currency.
And with that, we're going to have to take another commercial break.
Okay.
And we'll be back with the last segment of today's program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. And Claire, what do you have to share with us?
Well, this comes again from Zero Hedge, which is where the other articles about Turkey came from. And it's describing what's going on in the markets as a complete, consummate bloodbath. And emerging markets are collapsing as Turkey tantrum spread. And through July, many side sell analysts saw the stability in EM assets as a sign that the worst was over and encouraged investors to pile back in to take advantage of the blood in the streets. But as one of the veteran EM traders in Brazil explained to Zero Hedge this morning, this is a consummate bloodbath, adding that the liquidity has disappeared and as spooked retailers pile out of the ETFs that their advisors were saying were no-brainers, the pressure in real markets is explosive. And apparently it really is a bloodbath.
Well,
and,
as I mentioned earlier, our own stock market did not do well today.
No,
they didn't have their traditional Friday happy ending.
And apparently Turkey's agony explodes as Trump double steel aluminum tariffs. And it's one of those moments when you thought nothing could get worse for Turkey's economy. While watching the collapse of the Turkish lira and sensing that perhaps Erdogan's end is near, President Trump blindsided the NATO member with a tweet. Not an official document, but a tweet, nonetheless, announcing that he is doubling Turkey's steel and aluminum tariffs by 50% and 20% respectively. Why? Because he said our relationships with Turkey are not good at this time.
Well, you only tried to get rid of him a few years ago here.
Yeah. And it looks like the pressure is going to be ongoing. Getting back to Europe very briefly, as anti-open borders populism spreads, apparently Merkel and Macron's polls numbers right off the cliff. Apparently, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Emmanuel Macron are now faced with their worst public approval ratings hitting record lows as conservatism and populism spread throughout the European Union. And Mike, this is a no-brainer. The German and French people have had quite enough of the results of unrestrained, unvetted immigration, which has been brought to their respective countries.
Yeah,
And,
they absolutely have. I mean, it's a mess, and we're seeing the start of the pushback here.
Yeah. And a last story about President Obama ignoring genocide in South Africa. Now, he leveled Libya and lynched its leader, and people in government not concerned. They knew with certainty that Obama was destroying lives irreparably out of the goodness of his heart. So when he became the uncrowned king of the killer drone murdering Pakistanis, Afghani, Libyan, and Yemeni citizens in their thousands, that too, to his acolytes, generally justified, was justified and minimized and concealed. In June of 2008, Obama marked his election as the moment when the rise of the oceans shall begin to slow and our planet will begin to heal.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time here. The music is now starting.
Okay.
And so we have to head on off and got to do the laundry.
Yeah.
And so stay tuned for John Stadmiller.
Yes.
I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you are learning here, share it with everyone that you know, write letters, email. Unfortunately, that's starting to be filtered, apparently, according to this article that got sent to me. SneakerNet, just talk to people. It is up to us to keep the truth flowing against a corporate fascist government that is determined to go back to the world where we're buried in lies. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.